they keep their employees on payroll. By the way, the Democratic talking point is, oh, this is just cash to businesses. Tell that to the owner of the barbershop who takes an emergency loan to not fire all of her employees. That loan, under the terms of it's forgiven if the employees stay on the payroll. The Democrats are blocking that right now. What about unemployment insurance? The job numbers coming out shortly, I expect to be massive in terms of the job losses. I think we'll see north of 2-3 million people who've lost their jobs, and the numbers are getting worse. Every phone call I have is with more and more people that are losing their jobs. It is bad. It will come back, but it is bad right now. We need emergency support to get people through this dark time. This bill had $250 billion for additional unemployment insurance. What did that mean? That's an additional $600 per week for an additional 13 weeks. If you're one of the waitresses right now who's just been told your job's gone away and you apply for unemployment insurance, if this bill passes, you get an extra $600 immediately. But you know what? You don't right now, because Senate Democrats are blocking this. Now, if they have reasonable concerns, they're welcome to raise them. And by the way, this bill was drafted with the participation of nearly a dozen Senate Democrats who were actively part of the task forces submitting suggestions. In fact, one of the suggestions the Democrats submitted during the drafting was plus up those unemployment insurance numbers. And they got agreement. This was drafted in a bipartisan manner. But what happened? I got to tell you, yesterday, Sunday, most of us thought we were going to move to this. But then Nancy Pelosi decided it was time to play politics. Decided to throw a grenade into the whole process. And she had a list of demands, an over 1,000-page bill that she drops out of nowhere. And the demands she's pushing, I ask you, do these have anything to do with the coronavirus epidemic? A number of people have cited the famed quote from Rahm Emanuel, who's President Obama's chief of staff, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Sadly, we're seeing the embodiment of that cynical approach right now. Because all the people out of jobs the Democrats are using to push, what are they pushing for? Changing the emission standards on airplanes. Mr. President, what the hell do the emission standards on airplanes have to do with thousands of people dying and millions of people out of work in the coronavirus epidemic? Don't treat this bill like a partisan Christmas list. And by the way, Republicans, we've got things we would like to advance too. Things I believe in deeply. You want to talk about what I'd like to do? I'd like to abolish the IRS. I've campaigned on that all over the country. I'm going to continue fighting for that. But, Mr. President, I'm not standing here with an amendment saying, as part of this emergency relief, let's abolish the IRS. There's a place for that political and policy discussion. The Democrats are pushing wind and solar tax credits. Mr. President, what in the hell does a windmill have to do with this crisis? Other than there's some Democratic lobbyists getting fat and rich, and they're willing to extort a crisis to try to advance their political agenda. Mandates on corporate board diversity. So these are Democrats that want to social engineer. Now listen, I actually have a lot of problems with corporate boards. I think we have far too many corporate boards that are docile and do what management wants. That's a serious problem. A lot of discussion about stock buybacks. I'll tell you what I get concerned about stock buybacks is when you have compensation agreements in place that the executives get rich if they get a short-term boost in share price. And it ends up hurting the shareholders. So I'd love to see actually more vigorous boards of directors that make sure that you're not creating incentives to gain the stock price. That's a reasonable question. But they want to mandate effectively quotas on boards of directors. Mr. President, what in the hell does that have to do with this crisis? The Pelosi wish list wants to restructure the debt for the post office. This president, last I checked, look, our postal workers, they go through wind and rain and snow, but they haven't been laid off. I call upon both sides. Don't play games with this. This crisis isn't going to end tomorrow. It's not going to end the next day. It's going to last for a considerable time. It's going to require adults to step up and lead. On the pandemic, we need to follow the science. We need to listen to the doctors. We need to listen to the physicians. We need to do the steps that we're taking to keep people safe. On the economy, we need to give immediate relief to people who are hurting, and we need to make sure a liquidity crisis doesn't become a solvency crisis. You know, it's interesting. Many of the Democrats are saying they don't want corporate bailouts. Well, listen, I agree with them. I am passionately opposed to corporate bailouts. One of the things I was gratefully relieved about how this bill was structured is that it's structured as loans and not condition-free grants. And it's structured primarily so that it's not picking favored companies that happen to have big lobbying presence in Washington. What does it mean to not have a liquidity crisis become a solvency crisis? Let's take, for example, the airlines. I've spoken with just about every major airline CEO in the past 2 weeks. The airlines are losing billions of dollars every month. Now, they didn't cause that problem. Unlike the financial crisis in 2008, this crisis was not caused by misconduct of one industry or another. This pandemic wasn't caused. It's not the airline's fault that the federal government has shut down flights to Asia and to Europe. That's not their fault. It's not the owner of the restaurant in downtown Houston's fault that the city of Houston has shut down the restaurant. That's not that small business owner's fault. Now, what we don't want is when the bills come due for all of those businesses, for them to have to sell their assets at a fire sale. We don't want the restaurant owner who has a pizzeria who saved to buy this fantastic pizza oven to have to sell the pizza oven for pennies on the dollar because the liquidity crisis has become a solvency crisis. We don't want our U.S. airlines to have to put up a garage sale effectively to sell all their airplanes because they're going bankrupt in the midst of a crisis. We want to come out of this with strong, robust commercial airline sector. We want to come back out of this with the small businesses thriving. We want to come out of this with a thriving energy sector. We want to come out of this with jobs. So, Mr. President, I'm going to close this the way I started. By calling on Democrats, calling on Republicans, rise above petty partisan games. The Democratic leaders are playing these games. To every one of you Democrats, listen to the men and women in your states. Don't give in to the games. You know, most of the Democratic senators say they don't even know what their side wants. That it's just their leadership that's willing to hold the American people hostage for unrelated political partisan objectives. And by the way, one of the reasons I think Senate Democrats are so willing to engage in this is they expect the media to be utterly complicit in their cynical gamesmanship. So we stand here this afternoon, and it is not only the Democratic side of the chamber that is empty, but as I look up to the press, nobody's there. There's not a single reporter sitting in the chamber. We've seen the New York Times. Actually, there's nobody sitting in the chamber, so they may have closed the chamber, in which case that may have been an unfair assault. But it's not an unfair assault to say the New York Times is changing their headline to give political cover for the games of the Senate Democrats. This is a time of crisis. It's not a time to play games. It's a time to rise above.
Amen. Honestly, I don't think that most of the press, if not all of them, would have been there to cover this anyway, because it doesn't fit their media biases, which we all see is left-leaning for the most part. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who wants to say right now to the Democrats, especially Nancy Pelosi's fucking shriveled shrew of a self, fuck you. Many of us, including myself, are struggling right now and scared to death that they're going to lose everything that they worked so hard for, because all they want to do is play these political games and they claim that they care about the American people, yet their actions, time and time again, show otherwise. They don't care about the little guy. They only care about who and what can help line their pockets. This is all political bullshit. This is all them trying to do whatever they can to sabotage Trump's chances of getting reelected. It's all politics. They don't care about people losing their businesses. They don't care about people not being able to pay their bills. They don't care about parents not being able to feed their children. Shit, they don't even care that people are practically killing each other in grocery stores right now trying to get some fucking toilet paper. They don't care about anything. Alright, everybody, I'm sending out prayers and good vibes for all of you. I love you all very much. Please be smart, be safe, keep your kids inside, stay away from the elderly if you even have the sniffles, okay? These are not the greatest of times. I'm sure we'll be okay eventually, but for right now, just stay smart, stay safe. Love you all and God bless.